Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf on a Monday. Yes, I know, I didn't upload yesterday on Sunday because I couldn't film because I had back problems. Nothing to worry about, but sitting was painful. So I decided to skip the sitting and instead lie down on the couch and read. Anyway, so this is the recent reads on Sunday video filmed on Monday, in which I talk about a couple of the books that I've read recently. And the first book I want to talk to you about is a book that I read in January and finished just at the end of the month. And that is Karen Russell's debut novel, Swamplandia! Exclamation mark. Karen Russell is an American author from Florida originally. She did an MFA program, published short stories, and as I said, this is her debut. She wrote couple of more books since then. This was published in 2011, and I always wanted to read something by her, and normally then I just start with the debut novel because it also sounded kind of interesting. This was originally planned as a buddy read with KayB, whom most of you probably know because she doesn't have a channel, but she's a very regular commenter. But Kay decided after about 100 pages that this book was not for her and DNF'd it, which is completely fine. If a book is not for you, you shouldn't force yourself to read it, not even for a buddy read. And I can understand that, but let me first tell you a little bit about the broad outline of the book. So the book is set for a big part in this alligator wrestling amusement park called Swamplandia. And you have a family there who calls themselves the Big Tree family, adopting a Native American identity, even though they are not Native American, because probably they think it's marketing-wise. I'm not going to go into the problematic issues of that, because it's not really that important for the book. But anyway, so you have this family, a father called Chief Big Tree and his wife, and then 3 children, Ava, who is 12 when the book opens, her older sister, Osceola, and 16, and the eldest, Kiwi, the son, who is about 17. When the book opens, the mother has just died. She was the main attraction of this amusement park because she jumped into the water and wrestled with the alligators. She died suddenly, not from an accident with the alligators, but she had an illness, cancer, and was very sudden and very fast. So we are left with the 4 family members, and in general terms, this is a book showing us these 4 different characters, how they deal with the loss of their mother and the grief. Chief Big Tree, the father, decides to just skip. The middle sister, the 16-year-old, starts dating ghosts. Ava is going on a quest. And Kiwi, the son, leaves the remaining 2 sisters in order to earn money and save the amusement park. That sounds pretty straightforward, but the point is that the story is rather absurd. Not only dating a ghost, but what happens to Ava on her quest, the way this whole ghost dating is dealt with. Some people say it's magical realism. I wouldn't say that. It's just absurd. They are really absurd stories, and that's not for everyone. It wasn't quite for me either. I mean, I enjoyed part of the book. I thought it was funny at times, and that grief theme kept me going. But it's a really, weird, absurd story. And if you're not into that, it's probably not a book for you. The second book I want to talk to you about was also a buddy read, this time with Doris from All the Books. And we both finished the book, and that was Home by Marilyn Robinson, first published in 2008. Home is the second book in the Gilead series, the first one being Gilead, the second one being Home, the third one being Lila, and a new one coming out this year in September called Jack. I read Gilead also together with Doris end of last year, and we had quite some expectation for Home. If you haven't read Gilead or the Gilead series, in Gilead, the focus is on Reverend John James in a tiny little parish in the US, and his younger wife and his very young son, and John Ames is dying, and he knows that, and the book is one big letter or memoir written for his young son, who is 7. Next to, in the neighborhood of this family, of John Ames's family, lives the best friend of John Ames, who was also a reverend, Reverend Broughton. He lives with his middle-aged daughter Glory, and in Gilead, the long-lost prodigal son Jack came home. Oh my dear, came home, and you had this relationship between Jack and his father, but also with Jack and John Ames. And Jack did some stuff in the past that was not okay. So that was Gilead. Now, Home is sort of a parallel book because it covers more or less the same time period from Jack's homecoming until Jack leaves again. But from the perspective mainly of Glory, Jack's sister. There's a lot of religious discussion in there about morality and about what it means to come home also. And for me, it was a bit of a disappointment in the sense that I just had read Gilead. I knew what happened to Jack. I also knew some of the backstory. And even though I really liked Glory as a main focus, as a main character, the book didn't move enough or didn't give me enough new insights into this story to really grab me the way that Gilead did. I think it might be different. You can absolutely read these books as standalone. So it might be different if you read Home first, because then you don't know what happened in Gilead. But I just didn't. I felt the book was circling and didn't really go anywhere, even though the language was fantastic, and I can see Marilynne Robinson is an incredible writer language-wise, but the story as such of the book just didn't grab me as much, unfortunately. Next up is another debut novel, and that is Yi-Yun Lee's book, The Vagrants, first published in 2009. I read this also as a buddy read with a group consisting of Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, Adam from Memento Mori, Jess from Garden Scriptorium, and Kathleen. Yi-Yun Lee is a Chinese-American writer. She was born in China, but immigrated to the US in 1996 when she was in her mid-20s, and she writes in English, so it's not a translated work. The book is set in China in the 1970s and centers around a young woman, Gu Shan, who has been arrested and is about to be executed for counter-revolutionary work. And then you get a whole set of characters around her parents, but also the neighbors, a radio announcer and her husband, a young boy living on the street, and a younger man who is kind of a parasite living off his grandmother's money, and they all sort of converge in different ways, and it shows us something about the life in China at that time. The opinions in the group were quite mixed. I think Mel really loved the book the most. Adam was just not his thing, and the rest of us, Jess, Kathleen, and I, we were somewhere in the middle. I liked it fine. I didn't think it was brilliant. For me, there were too many characters that were not really fleshed out that well, all of them, but some of the characters I really wondered what they were doing in the story. Um, Story-wise, there was a bit too much of coincidence and weird events that sort of drove the plot forward. So for me, it was a kind of a mixed bag. If you want to know the Goodreads rating I gave it, it was a 3-star, which for me means it's not a bad book. It's a good book, but it was just not quite my thing. I'm happy that I read it, but it was not quite my thing. Book number 4, and we are finally getting to nonfiction, because I promised to feature more nonfiction on my channel, and I will try. And the book I want to talk about is Notorious RBG, written by Irin Kamon and Shana Kniznik, first published in 2015. Irin Kamon is a journalist who won several awards for her stories about sexual harassment, discrimination, and Shana Kniznik is a lawyer. And together they team up to write a biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whom you probably all know is an associate justice on the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court. She was born, RBG was born in 1933, and she was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1993 by Bill Clinton as the second woman on the Supreme Court, the first one, of course, being Sandra Day O'Connor. I think I really love the book, but I have to say I'm probably not objective. I'm a huge fan of RBG. I think she had a fascinating life, starting out in the 1950s, studying law at Harvard and Columbia, then trying to get a position as a lawyer in a law firm, which didn't happen because she was a woman. She then went on to teach at university, Rutgers University, started courses on women and the law, and then her focus really from then on, early 70s, became gender discrimination. She did a lot of cases, argued cases as a lawyer when she finally had the chance in front of the Supreme Court. There are landmark cases in acknowledging that there is something like gender discrimination at all. And there are, of course, landmark cases once she became a justice. What I really love about the book is that I think, I'm a lawyer. I'm fascinated by the law and law decisions and cases. But if you're not, the book is still really wonderful to read, because the combination of these two authors, journalist and lawyer, they were able to discuss the landmark cases, because you have to if you're talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but they write it in a way that is engaging, and you don't need any knowledge of law, or you don't have to be a lawyer at all in order to understand it and enjoy it. And for me, this book once again made it clear how very, very important RBG was and is, especially within the context of gender discrimination. If you're at all interested in this kind of topic, pick up the book. It's available on Script, by the way, if you just want to try it out. And you don't have to be afraid at all that it is, dry legal stuff, because it isn't. It's just fascinating. And the last book for this recent reads video is a new release, January 2020. I featured the book in my January to be released video. Also a debut novel, a sci-fi by Megan Angelo, Followers. Megan Angelo is an American author who published in magazines before she wrote this, her first novel. Followers is set partly in the present, 2015, and partly 35-ish years in the future. In the present, we follow roommates Orla and Floss, who try to make, their life as writers. Floss wants to be famous. That's basically all she wants to be. And the dynamic between these two roommates in 2015, the start of getting known on social media, having followers, develop a followership, and getting fame from that. That's Floss, while Orla is writing in an internet outlet. That's one part. And then move forward 35-ish years, and we have Floss and her daughter Marlo living in this future society where celebrities are chosen to live in a gated community and sort of watched and commented on throughout the day, except when they go to the toilet. And then you have Marlo trying to find out about her mother and especially who her father is. I always have hopes for a new sci-fi book, but I thought this was just okay. And I had two main things. First of all, I thought the book was too detailed on lives and food and stuff like that. That was the details sort of muddled the book for me. But that was not my main issue. It was a debut novel after all. But what I really don't like is when you write sci-fi or a dystopian or futuristic novel, and the future, the premises you chose for the future society really doesn't play an important role at all in the book. And it's, in this case, not even very inventive, because Big Brother is watching you, and lives recorded all the time. That's not new, which is okay. You don't have to come up with something that nobody ever thought of, but at least you have to then, for me, make the story really embedded in that future. But the story, if you strip all the future stuff away, the story could have just as well have been set in the early 21st century. A young woman, Marlo, looking to find out about her family. So, yeah, I no, it was a meh book. Brian, you get money again. It was not bad, but it was just a bit boring, and certainly not what I would call a sci-fi novel. Anyway, these were my 5, I think, books that I read recently. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.